A guy strolled into a quiet bar, sat down, and ordered a whiskey. He looked around, relaxed for a moment, and just as he was about to take a sip, a man burst through the door, panting and out of breath. "Bill!" the man yelled. "Your house just burned down!" The guy jumped up in a panic and dashed outside, but as he stood there staring at the street, he paused and thought, "Wait a minute. I don't even have a house." He turned around, walked back into the bar, and sat down, finally taking that sip of whiskey. Before he could even settle in, another guy rushed in, eyes wide with urgency. "Bill, your dad just passed away!" The man sprang to his feet again, ran outside, hopped on his horse, and rode a short distance, but then, just like before, it hit him. "Hold on, I don't even have a dad." Confused but still thirsty, he returned to the bar, picked up his drink, and took a big gulp. Just as he was savoring the whiskey, a third man rushed in, shouting excitedly, "Bill, you've won the lottery!" Without missing a beat, he rushed outside, hopped on his horse, and galloped all the way to the bank. But halfway there, he pulled back on the reins and stopped dead in his tracks. "Wait a second," he muttered to himself. "My name's not Bill." It was a long day for the two crews working to install telephone poles along a new highway. The foreman had divided them into two groups, each with a leader, and asked them to report back by sunset to see how much progress they'd made. As the sun dipped low, the two crews returned. The foreman approached the leader of the first group, eager to hear how they did. "How many poles did your crew install today?" he asked. 11, came the reply. "Not bad," the foreman said, giving him a pat on the back. "That's good work." Feeling pleased, the foreman turned to Santa, the leader of the second group. "How about you? How many poles did your crew manage to install?" Santa scratched his head and said, 2. The foreman's face twisted with frustration. "2? Just 2? The other group installed 11. What happened?" Santa grinned and shrugged. "Well, you should have seen how much they left sticking out of the ground." Santa came home from a long day at work expecting to relax. But when he walked into the living room, he found his lovely wife, Jito, still lounging in her bathrobe, looking a bit puzzled. "Jito, darling," he said. "What's the matter? You're still in your robe?" Jito sighed and looked up at him. "Ah, dear, I wasn't feeling too well. I didn't know what to do, so I called up Dr. Khurana. He said, 'I'll need a specimen,' and then just hung up." "I don't know what a specimen is." Santa scratched his head, thinking for a moment. "Well, I'm not sure either. Why don't you go ask Mrs. Banta upstairs? Maybe she'll know what that means." So, Jito bounded up the stairs, eager to find out more. But not long after, there was a loud thump, a bang, and a crashing sound. Santa jumped up in alarm and rushed to the door. "Jito, what happened?" he called out. Jito was lying in a heap at the bottom of the landing, looking utterly flustered. She groaned and said, "I went up to Prito and told her what the doctor said. She said, 'Just piss in a bottle.' So I told her to shit in her purse, and that's when the fight started." Santa and Banta, two not-so-bright fellows, found themselves facing a challenge. They needed to get across the desert, but didn't have enough money for a car. After a bit of thinking, they decided to buy a camel. The camel dealer, knowing the desert well, told them, "This camel will get you across the desert as long as you make sure he's full of water before you leave." Santa and Banta took the camel down to the nearest water hole, but no matter how hard they tried, the camel wouldn't drink. Santa scratched his head and then had an idea. "I've got it," he exclaimed. "What if I hold the camel's head down in the water and you suck on his, well, from the other end? That way the water will get sucked up like a straw." Banta hesitated for a moment, his brow furrowed. Then, after a long pause, he shrugged. "All right. Let's give it a try." A few minutes passed, and Santa checked in. "Well, is it working?" Banta, who was in the middle of the strange task, paused and looked up. "I think it's going to work, but could you maybe lift his head just a little bit? I'm just getting mud." Banta was known for his wild ideas, always pushing the limits of what seemed possible. One day he decided he wanted to test just how fast a bicycle could go before it became uncontrollable. So he turned to his friend, who owned an old Maruti, and came up with a plan. "Hey," Banta said, "can you tie my bike to the back of your car? I want to see how fast I can go on this thing." His friend, a bit confused but always up for a laugh, agreed. Sure, why not? So Banta carefully tied his bicycle to the bumper of the Maruti and gave his friend some instructions. I'll ring my bike bell once if I want you to go faster, twice if I want you to maintain speed, and I'll ring it repeatedly if I want you to slow down. With everything set, they took off. At first, everything went smoothly. The car slowly picked up speed, and Banta was managing just fine. They were cruising at 60 kilometers per h, and Banta was enjoying the wind in his face. But suddenly, out of nowhere, a black Honda zoomed up beside them. The driver of the Maruti, forgetting all about Banta and his bicycle, got caught up in a spontaneous drag race. The two cars were neck and neck, speeding down the highway. Just a few kilometers down the road, Officer Santa was sitting in his cruiser, radar gun ready. He heard the roar of the two cars approaching, and as his radar flashed 100 kilometers per h, he quickly grabbed his radio. "Hey, you guys aren't going to believe this," Officer Santa called in, barely able to contain his amusement. "There's a Honda and a Maruti racing out here on Highway 22, and in between them, there's a guy on a bicycle ringing his bell and waving his arms, trying to pass them." Banta, a self-proclaimed mystery lover, eagerly arrived at the theater for the opening night of a much-anticipated play. However, when he found his seat, he was disappointed. It was way back in the theater, far from the stage, making it impossible for him to fully enjoy the performance. Determined to get a better view, Banta called over an usher and whispered, "I absolutely love a good mystery, and I've been waiting for this show for weeks. But to fully enjoy it and follow the clues, I need to watch from up close. Look how far away I am. If you can get me a better seat, I'll make it worth your while with a handsome tip." The usher, eager to make a little extra cash, nodded and promised, "I'll see what I can do. Just wait here." Excited for the potential reward, the usher rushed to speak with his co-workers in the box office. He hoped to find an open seat closer to the stage, and with only 3 minutes left before the curtain rose, he found an unused ticket near the ticket window. Grabbing it, he hurried back to Banta, full of anticipation. "Follow me," the usher whispered, leading Banta through the aisles. They made their way down to the second row, and the usher proudly pointed to an empty seat right in the center. "Here you go," the usher said. "Perfect spot." Banta looked around, satisfied. "This is perfect, thank you so much." He handed the usher a quarter as a tip. The usher glanced down at the quarter in his hand, then leaned in with a grin and whispered, "The butler did it in the parlor with the candlestick." An army major was going around visiting the sick soldiers in the field hospital, checking on their conditions and morale. He walked up to one soldier lying in bed and asked, "What's your problem, soldier?" "Chronic syphilis, sir," the soldier replied solemnly. The major nodded, looking concerned. "What treatment are you getting for that?" 5 minutes with the wire brush each day, sir." "What's your ambition, then?" asked the major, trying to encourage him. "To get back to the front, sir," said the soldier with determination. "Good man," the major said, giving him a supportive pat on the shoulder. Moving on, the major stopped at the next bed and asked the same question. "What's your problem, soldier?" "Chronic piles, sir," the soldier answered, grimacing in discomfort. The major raised an eyebrow. "What treatment are you getting for that?" 5 minutes with the wire brush each day, sir." The major nodded thoughtfully. "What's your ambition?" "To get back to the front, sir," the soldier said, clearly eager to return to action. "Good man," barked the major, moving on to the next bed. He approached Santa, who was lying there looking a bit more relaxed. "And what's your problem, soldier?" he asked. "Chronic gum disease, sir," Santa replied, looking a little sheepish. The major, growing used to hearing similar answers, asked, "What treatment are you getting?" 5 minutes with the wire brush each day, sir," Santa said. The major sighed and asked, "What's your ambition, then?" Santa grinned mischievously. "To get the wire brush before the other two, sir." Prado sat at home feeling utterly overwhelmed. The day had been one disaster after another. Her baby refused to eat, the washing machine had broken down, and she hadn't had a chance to go shopping. To make matters worse, She had sprained her ankle and was hobbling around the house. On top of it all, she was expecting 2 couples for dinner that evening, and her house was a complete mess. As she sat there in despair, the phone rang. Preto quickly grabbed the receiver, hoping for some good news. She was relieved to hear the voice of her mother on the other end. "How are you, darling?" her mother asked kindly. "What kind of day are you having?" "Oh, Mother!" Preto burst into tears. "It's been terrible. The baby won't eat. The washing machine's broken. I haven't had time to go shopping, and I've just sprained my ankle. I'm hobbling around like a cripple. And on top of it all, I'm supposed to have 2 couples to dinner tonight, and the house is a disaster." Her mother, always the voice of reason, immediately jumped into action. "Oh, darling, sit down. Relax and close your eyes. Don't worry about a thing. I'll be over in half an hour. I'll do your shopping, clean the house, and cook your dinner. I'll even feed the baby, and I'll call a repairman to fix the washing machine. I know exactly who can come over right away. I'll take care of everything. In fact, I'll even call Ashok at the office and tell him he should come home and help for once." Preto wiped her tears away, feeling much better. "Oh, thank you so much, Mother. You're a lifesaver." There was a pause on the other end, and then Preto said, "Wait a minute. Who's Ashok?" Her mother replied, slightly confused. "Ashok, your husband. Who else?" Preto blinked. "But this isn't 2,369,125 inches?" Santa had just gotten a shiny new car and was taking it for a spin down the road when, in a moment of distraction, he accidentally cut off a truck driver. The truck driver, honking his horn in frustration, motioned for Santa to pull over. Santa did as he was told, stopping at the side of the road. The truck driver stormed out of his vehicle, looking furious. He pulled a piece of chalk from his pocket and drew a big circle on the ground. "Stand in that circle and don't move," the truck driver barked. Santa, slightly confused but willing to comply, stood in the middle of the circle as the truck driver made his next move. He walked over to Santa's brand new car and began slashing the leather seats with a knife. Turning around, the truck driver saw a slight grin forming on Santa's face. He narrowed his eyes. "Oh, you think that's funny, huh? Watch this," he growled. With a dramatic motion, the truck driver pulled a baseball bat out of his truck and smashed every single window in Santa's car. But when he looked back at Santa, the grin was still there, and Santa was trying to suppress a laugh. Fuming with anger, the truck driver stormed back to his truck, grabbed the knife again, and sliced through all of Santa's tires. He was practically shaking with rage when he turned to look at Santa, and now Santa was chuckling. The truck driver was losing his patience. He stomped back to his truck, grabbed a can of petrol, and poured it all over the car. With a flick of his lighter, he set the car on fire. Turning back around, he found Santa doubled over with laughter, almost on the verge of falling over. "What is so funny?" the truck driver yelled, his face turning bright red. Santa, still chuckling, wiped tears from his eyes and said, "Well, every time you weren't looking, I stepped outside the circle." It was a dark, stormy night, and Santa was stranded by the side of the road, hitchhiking through the relentless rain and wind. The storm was so fierce that he could barely see a few feet ahead of him. Cars weren't passing by, and he was beginning to lose hope. Then, out of nowhere, a car approached. It stopped right next to him. Without a second thought, Santa hopped in, slammed the door shut, and sighed in relief. However, it wasn't until he was seated that he realized there was nobody behind the wheel. The car started moving slowly on its own. In a panic, Santa looked ahead, and just as he noticed a sharp curve in the road, he froze. Terrified, he started praying, begging for his life as he gripped the seat. The storm raged on, and the car crept closer to the curve. Just as it seemed they were about to hit it, a hand reached through the window and steered the wheel, guiding the car safely around the bend. Santa was paralyzed with fear, but every time they approached another curve, that same mysterious hand appeared and took control of the wheel, guiding them with precision. He couldn't believe what was happening, and he was too terrified to move. Finally, gathering what little strength he had left, Santa flung the door open, bolted out of the car, and ran for his life. He sprinted all the way to the nearest town, soaking wet and shaking in fear. Breathlessly, he stumbled into a bar, ordered 2 shots of whiskey, and began telling everyone about the terrifying experience he had just survived. A stunned silence filled the room as everyone listened to Santa's harrowing tale. It wasn't the whiskey or his slurred speech that caught their attention, but the tears in his eyes. He wasn't drunk. He was genuinely frightened. About half an hour later, two men walked into the same bar, and one of them nudged the other, pointing towards Santa. "Look," he said with a grin, "that's the guy who got in the car while we were pushing it." Banta was in the doctor's office, his leg propped up and carefully examined. The doctor was finishing up the assessment when he turned to Banta and asked, "How did this happen?" "Well, doctor, it all started 15 years ago," Banta began, his voice trailing off as he recalled the memory. The doctor, impatient to get to the point, interrupted. "Never mind the past. Tell me how you broke your leg this morning." Banta paused for a moment, then nodded. "Like I was saying, 15 years ago, I started working on the farm. One night, right after I'd gone to bed, the farmer's beautiful daughter came into my room." The doctor raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. "Go on." "She asked if there was anything I wanted." Banta continued, oblivious to the doctor's frustration. "I told her, no, everything's fine." "Are you sure?" she asked, still standing in the doorway. "I'm sure," I said. "Isn't there anything I can do for you?" She persisted. "Well, I reckon not," I replied, getting more and more confused by the whole situation. The doctor, trying to remain patient, asked again, "Okay, but how does this have anything to do with your broken leg?" Banta looked at him, seemingly lost in thought. Finally, he explained, "Well, this morning, when it dawned on me what she meant, I fell off the roof." Banta and his fiancée, Preto, rushed into town hall just moments before closing time. They saw the judge about to leave for the day, so they hurried over to him and asked if he could marry them right then and there. The judge raised an eyebrow and asked, "Do you have a marriage license?" "No," Banta said, glancing at Preto, "but we can go get one." "All right," the judge replied, "but hurry up before I lock up." They dashed over to the clerk's office, just catching him as he was locking up for the night. After a bit of back and forth, they finally got their marriage license and rushed back to the judge. He took a quick look at the document and pointed out that they had filled the names in backwards. Banta's name was where Preto's should be, and Preto's name was where Banta's should be. "No problem," Banta said, slightly flustered. "We'll fix it." So they rushed back to the clerk's office again. This time, after a quick glance at the new license, the judge noticed something else. The date was in the wrong format. Back to the clerk they went, and again the process repeated. After 5 reissued licenses, the judge finally looked over the last one, nodded, and said, "All right, this one's perfect." "I hope you appreciate why I made you go through all that trouble," the judge said with a serious tone. "If there were any irregularities on that license, your marriage wouldn't be legal, and any children you had would be considered technical bastards." Banta paused for a moment, then with a grin said, "That's funny. That's exactly what the clerk called you." The CBI is interviewing 3 men for a highly sensitive position. They bring them in one at a time for separate interviews. The first man enters and sits down. The interviewer asks him, "Do you love your wife?" "Yes, sir," the man responds. "Do you love your country?" "Yes, sir." "What do you love more, your wife or your country?" "My country, sir." "All right, then, we've brought in your wife. Take this gun, go into the next room, and kill her." The man walks into the next room, and after about 5 minutes of eerie silence, he comes back into the room, drenched in sweat, his tie loosened. I couldn't do it, sir," he admits, looking down. The interviewer nods and lets him leave. The second man walks in, answers the same questions with the same responses. He's given the same task: take the gun and kill his wife. He walks into the next room, but only moments later he returns and admits, "I can't do it either." The interviewer sighs and lets him go. Finally, the third man enters, our beloved Santa. He answers the questions, again affirming his love for his country over his wife. He's given the gun and told to go kill his wife. Santa walks into the next room. For what seems like forever, the interviewer hears blam, 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 and then the unmistakable sound of crashing furniture. After several minutes, Santa walks back into the room, tie askew, panting and disheveled. The interviewer, wide-eyed, asks, "What happened? What took so long?" Santa looks at him and says, "The gun you gave me was filled with blanks, so I had to strangle her." Santa and Banta decided to play a quick round of golf, cutting it short to 9 holes due to time constraints. Santa suggests, "Let's make it interesting. Whoever has the lowest score by the end of the game gets Rs 500. Banta agrees, and they set off. After 8 holes, Banta is ahead by a stroke, but as they approach the 9th, he hooks his ball into the rough. "Help me find my ball," Banta says. "You check over there." After 5 minutes of searching, neither of them has found the ball. Since a lost ball means a 4-point penalty, Banta, looking a bit desperate, pulls another ball out of his pocket and tosses it to the ground. "I found my ball," he announces triumphantly. Santa looks at him with disbelief, shakes his head and says, "After all these years of friendship, you'd cheat me for a measly Rs 500. Banta protests. "What do you mean, cheat? I found my ball right here." Santa stares at him, a sly grin spreading across his face. "A liar, too! I've been standing on your ball for the last 5 minutes. A man and his wife were lying in bed discussing ways to improve their communication. The wife asked, "Honey, how do I let you know when I'm in the mood, without saying it outright?" The husband chuckled and replied, "Simple. Just reach over and tug it 3 times. That's the signal." The wife laughed and then asked, "And what if I'm not in the mood?" The husband grinned mischievously. "Then just reach over and tug it 200 times. Banta had been eagerly anticipating the moment, his first visit to meet the parents of the young woman he had been seeing for several months. He had always imagined the meeting would go smoothly, but as the day drew closer, his nerves started to get the better of him. By the time he arrived at their home, he was already feeling uneasy. Nervous, yes, but also a bit of a digestive disaster. He rang the doorbell right on time, hoping his stomach would cooperate. But as soon as he stepped inside, things took a turn for the worse. The coffee was served, and halfway through his cup, the discomfort in his stomach grew unbearable. Banta could feel the inevitable approaching, a dangerous, uncontrollable pressure that threatened to embarrass him beyond belief. There was no holding it in any longer. He discreetly released a tiny fart, hoping no one would notice, but of course it didn't go unnoticed. "Boxer!" the young woman's mother called out, glancing down at the family dog who was lounging at Banta's feet. Banta, feeling a wave of relief, thought to himself, "Well, at least they think it was the dog." Confident he had dodged a bullet, he let out another one, slightly louder this time. "Boxer!" the mother snapped again. Banta felt a glimmer of hope. This is it! One more and I'll be fine. He had to let it go. He did, and this one was a real humdinger. "Boxer!" the mother yelled, her voice rising in a panic. "Get over here before he shits on you!" 17? Santa and Banta were sitting at the bar enjoying a few drinks when the boredom of just drinking started to set in. Santa, feeling a little adventurous, turned to Banta and said, "Hey, how about a ride in my airplane?" Banta, squinting through the haze of alcohol, asked, "Wait, you've got an airplane?" Santa grinned and said, "Yep, let's go for a spin." A couple more beers later, they were off, soaring above the city in Santa's private plane. They cruised around for a while, taking in the sights, but eventually the novelty wore off. Banta, looking out the window, said, "Okay, I'm bored. Time to land." Santa, already feeling tipsy, began flying in circles, scanning for a place to land. He spotted a small airstrip below, and after a few wobbly maneuvers, said, "That looks like a good spot. Let's land there." He circled the airstrip and came in for a landing, but just as he was about to touch down, he suddenly swerved and pulled the plane back up into the air. "Shit!" he exclaimed. "That's the shortest runway I've ever seen. How is anyone supposed to land on that?" But with no other options nearby, he decided to try again. This time, the result was the same. Frustrated and now a little panicked, Santa turned to Banta and said, "All right, I'm giving it one last shot. If I can't land this time, we're crashing, and I just hope we survive." Santa made another attempt, but this time the plane went off the runway entirely, crashing in a heap. Miraculously, they both crawled out of the wreckage unscathed. Santa, furious, stormed around the wreck, shaking his fists at the airstrip. "I'm going to find the idiot who designed this runway and wring his neck. It's way too short for anyone to land on." Banta, surveying the area, looked around and said, "Yeah, but look how wide it is." Santa had always enjoyed the peace and quiet of his little farmhouse on a rural highway. But over the years, things changed. What used to be a sleepy dirt road was now a shortcut for speed-hungry drivers who zipped by like they were in a Grand Prix. And unfortunately for Santa, his chickens weren't great at looking both ways. Each day, 3 to 6 of his beloved birds met a feathery end under the wheels of passing cars. Finally, fed up with the carnage, Santa rang the local inspector. "You've got to do something," he shouted. "People are driving like maniacs out here. My chickens are dropping like flies." The inspector, already familiar with Santa's daily complaints, sighed and asked, "Well, what exactly do you want me to do?" "I don't care what you do," Santa snapped. "Just do something before I start charging road tolls per chicken." So, the next day, the local council sent workers out to install a bright yellow sign that read, "Slow School Crossing." Santa waited, watched, counted. 3 days later, he was back on the phone. "Inspector, your sign is worse than useless. The school crossing sign makes them go faster. I swear, one guy did a burnout." Trying a different approach, the inspector ordered the workers to replace the sign with "Slow Children at Play." But that only made things worse. Apparently, nothing inspired reckless acceleration like the image of children playing. For the next 3 weeks, Santa called the inspector daily, each time more dramatic than the last. Finally, one morning, Santa asked, "Can I just put up my own sign? Yours aren't helping at all." Worn down and desperate for some peace, the inspector sighed. "Fine, go for it. Put up whatever sign you want." And just like that, the calls stopped. 3 quiet weeks went by. Not a peep from Santa, no complaints, no poultry casualty reports. Curious, and maybe a little hopeful, the inspector decided to drive out and see what miracle Santa had pulled off. When he arrived at the farm, he spotted it immediately. Right near the roadside, on a full sheet of plywood, painted in huge, bold yellow letters, was Santa's homemade sign. It read, "Slow Nudist Colony." After a long night of drinking, Santa and Banta stumbled out of the bar, laughing loudly and leaning on each other for balance. Somehow, they made it to the car and managed to get it started. Santa took the wheel, and off they went, weaving slightly as the car hummed down the quiet country road. Just a couple of minutes into the drive, Banta's eyes widened as he pointed to the passenger side window. "Santa, look! There's a face, an old ghost's face." Santa turned, and sure enough, an elderly man's wrinkled face was staring in at them through the window, pale, silent, and completely unbothered by the car's movement. Terrified, Santa slammed his foot on the accelerator, but the face didn't budge. It floated right along with the car. Trembling, Banta rolled the window down just a crack and asked, "Well, what do you want?" The old man tilted his head and said calmly, "You got any tobacco?" Banta, shaking, handed him a cigarette. "Take it! Take it!" he cried, and then yelled, "Santa, floor it!" Santa didn't need to be told twice. They rocketed ahead, wheels screeching, heartbeats pounding. After a few minutes of silence, they both began to laugh nervously. "Man," said Santa, "that was insane. But look, we're doing 80 now. No way he's catching up again." Just as he said that, tap, 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 came a gentle knock on the window. Banta turned slowly and screamed, "He's back!" He rolled the window down an inch and croaked, "Yes!" The old man raised an eyebrow and asked, "Got a light?" Banta fumbled in his pocket, pulled out a lighter, and hurled it out the window. "Here, take it!" "Step on it, Santa!" Now pushing 100 miles per hour, the car tore down the road. They were white as sheets, trying to forget the ghostly encounters. Suddenly, tap, 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 again. Banta lost it. "Oh my God, he's back again!" This time he didn't wait. He rolled the window all the way down and screamed, "What now?" The old man gave a kind little smile and said gently, "Do you boys need a hand getting out of the mud?"